Hey, fellow bookworms. In this episode, I sit down with David Crow, author of The Pale-Faced Lie, a gripping memoir about growing up under the control of a violent ex-con father who taught him to lie, steal, and manipulate. David's story is one of survival, but also of unlearning, how he fought to reclaim his own voice, question everything he was taught, and ultimately escape a life built on deceit. We talk about the cost of telling the truth when you've been raised in a house of lies, and most importantly, what it means to heal. It is my honor to introduce you to David Crow. Afternoon, David. Thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Well, I'm great, Aaron. It's a pleasure. And I Googled you and all that, and I feel very fortunate to be with somebody so famous and good at what they do.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
So, I think maybe before we get started, if you don't mind, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself. How would you introduce your story to somebody who doesn't know you?
Well, what I call the elevator speech is I was born just about 9 months after my dad got out of San Quentin for a crime that easily could have gotten him the death penalty. He was incredibly lucky. The man he intended to kill with his accomplice would have bled out within minutes, but the guy's wife found him. And he spent weeks and weeks touch and go, where he could have easily died. He was blinded. He never walked again without a walker. Um, so I'm born 9 months after that. My dad had an amazingly high IQ, and he convinced the prison psychiatrist and the chief physician that he had been framed, that the crime was uh, that he had been convicted of was dramatically overstated and that he was mostly innocent. He was 20. He was a veteran. He in and out 1 year, and my mom was pregnant with my older sister. And so he, instead of getting like 10 to 20 years, he only got 3.5, maybe 4. So when he got out of San Quentin, he had two goals. One, to go someplace where his accomplice wouldn't find him. He wasn't afraid of his accomplice in the sense of a one-on-one, but he betrayed him and really betrayed him in a huge way. And he was afraid of an ambush, and he should have been. So he fled to the Navajo Indian Reservation, and it served two purposes. The odds of his accomplice actually finding him there. You go back to the world before internet, before cell phones, before cable, before anything, right? Uh, this is very early 50s. And all you had to do is not put your name in the phone directory and you were basically invisible. But even there on the Navajo Indian Reservation, we lived in a tiny village of 20 houses that were, 150 miles from the biggest city, which is Albuquerque. The second reason he went there is because you could lie about being a violent felon. You have to check the violent felon box when somebody asks you about your past employment or record. And he knew he could dummy up some false recommendations and no one would look. I say this with all respect to the Navajo people who I love, but at the time he came there, before the Navajo people really got to go to college and got training and all that, any person that showed up on a reservation was willing to work and had any skill set whatsoever, could drive, use a shovel, pipe, as long as they didn't shoot their boss that day, they got promoted.
Mm.
And now, since then, because there'll be Native Americans listening, there's a fantastic effort to bring education to the reservation. And now the Navajos have an entire fleet of doctors, lawyers, nurses, engineers, you name it. They're very smart people. And once given the opportunity, they took advantage. But when we were little, there wasn't that. So Dad shows up on the reservation. He's a smart guy. He's read a lot of books, and he gets hired in a very good job. And he figures his accomplice will never find him, and his employer will never find out. He's right on both scores. So we're in this tiny little enclave on the reservation. I'm just under 4 years old. And Dad takes me out for a car ride. So the part of reservation we lived on is very, very high altitude, 7,700 feet. So, and it's extremely cold in the winter. So Arizona, as you know, goes all the way down to Phoenix sea level, but up to the Grand Canyon. Uh, I think our highest peak in Arizona is like 10,000, maybe almost 11. It's high. So where we lived was freezing in the winter. So what Dad did is he took me out in the car that I called the Green Bomber. It's on the cover. It's really a Rambler Ambassador, but it's mostly green. And I had a name for everything and everyone, right? It's just one of those things. And so
Sure.
he takes me out in the Green Bomber, and we're in this desert plateau and it's frozen. And he would drive as fast as he could, slam on the brakes, and spin the car. And it was like the whirly round at a Ferris wheel, except in a circus, but out of control. We would spin for miles. And then as soon as we straightened up, he'd hit the gas again, we'd take off. So there's no seat belts, right? And I'm bouncing everywhere and, laughing, but I'm scared.
Sure.
Scared, well, because my head hit the ceiling, hit the glove box. One point I hit the glove box. He said, "Don't break the glove box. We can't afford a new car." And so we're on this ride, and he said, "I have to talk to you." And you think, well, most kids that age aren't going to remember a conversation. I'm sure there are hundreds I don't. But he said, "We have to get rid of your mother. We have to get rid of her because if you grow up with her, you'll wind up crazy like her. So I'm going to come to you and tell you when we have to get rid of her, and you're going to go along." And that's where the book begins.
Gripping. Yeah. I mean, with the first sentence, I was completely captivated. Out of curiosity, what made you decide that memoir was going to be the best vehicle to share your story?
Oh, aren't you smart? No wonder you're doing what you. So I went until my early 50s without really telling anybody what happened. My kids knew bits and pieces. Uh, my wife knew a little bit, but I never really told anybody what had happened to us. And I was ashamed of it, and I was embarrassed by it. And I always had the feeling that I really deserved it. And I found through my readers, almost 30,000 readers on Amazon and Goodreads. And so it's really rewarding to get all these interesting. But how many people who grew up in a bad circumstance that really think it's their fault or they deserve it or they can't do better, right? And so I had this terrible feeling all my life that, well, I'm no better than my dad and my mom and stepmother. This is pretty much what I deserve, having my last name. And life's just not going to deal me a fair hand. I'm just not going to get what I want out of life. But the other part of my psyche struggled with that. Like, why not? What have I done? Am I really that bad of a guy that I can't have a nice, good life? But what I found is several things. When you're not willing to be open about yourself, no one else is willing to be open with you either. No vulnerability, no friendship, or very limited,
Yeah, shallow level maybe, huh?
very shallow. And so I made everything into a joke. Everything was funny, dark humor. And whenever anybody would ask me a question about my family, it would just turn it into a huge joke. And that caught up to me in lots of different ways. And I was unhappy with it because, in a large respect, the people I wanted to attract as friends and other, I couldn't. And the people I did attract were basically people who were broken like myself. And so I struggled and struggled with that. And I read every self-help book you can find, went to a couple of psychiatrists, and mostly I think all I did was entertain them with stories. And nothing worked for me. But the town of Gallup, New Mexico has a hold on me that's unbelievable. They say, uh, if childhood is a city you can never leave, I can never leave Gallup.
I've heard you say that. I love that quote.
And and I think for us, if you had a good childhood, maybe, it's got great memories. No one had a perfect childhood, but
Yeah.
what I would do as a lobbyist, I could travel to all 50 states and fly frequently around the country and, take a day off here, day off there. And I would always go back to Gallup and sit in front of the house that I thought held the deepest, darkest secret. That something in that house had a grip on me and I could not break through. And a lot of bad things happened in that house. But I would sit in front of that house for hours. I mean, and I always show up in a different car, dressed a different way, right? And go on to my next city. And one day, um, a guy came out of his house and just banged on my window. And I rolled the window down. He said, "Why do you keep coming to my house? Are you stalking me? What's wrong with you? I see you over the years. You do this, and I'm tired of it." And I said, "Well, I was one of four little kids. We left here." I explained the story. And he said, "Well, that's impossible." He said, "There were two little blonde kids and two girls." I said, "Well, I'm that blonde guy, not blonde anymore, really." And he said, "I don't believe you." And I said, "Well, if I describe the inside of your house in perfect detail, will you believe me?" So I did it. I said, "If you go in your garage, there's a crack. It goes straight and it bends left. About 45 degrees. If you go inside, you got black and green tile. Some of it's chipped unless you fixed it. There's a pole with a rust mark." He said, "Okay, you're that kid. Come in." Turned out he was a retired widow that had bought the house after we left and lived there the entire time. And I walked into the house and looked at the living room, and I could see my mom in three dimensions lying on the ground in fetal position. And the look on her face was like that look on the picture of the woman on National Geographic that everybody remembers, where it's the most hopeless look in the world. You would look at that face and say, that person would be way better off dead than living what they're living. And I saw that, and I remembered the day my dad brought me back there and found my mom like that. And in that day, uh, my mom eventually saw me. My dad sent me in there to see if she was still in the house. And I couldn't move. And I started shaking. And I'm convinced now I had a nervous breakdown, but I had no idea what that was. And even my underwear was wet, something that would never happen to me. And I just couldn't move. And every nerve was on fire. So she saw me and she ran up to me and put her arms around me and said, "You can't leave me. You're my oldest son. You have to take care of me. I'm 10 years old." She said, "I'll go on welfare. You cut grass, deliver newspapers like you always do, and we'll be fine. And you can't abandon me." My father realizes something wrong. He comes up and he rips me out of her arms. He hits her hard.
Mm.
She collapses, starts hysterically crying, fetal position. There's no electricity in this house. She's got under $200, just very few clothes, and she's in a thin cotton dress. And there's a dirty mattress in the living room that we left her with. No food, no water, no money, no nothing. My dad dragged me out of that house. He put me in the car. Because at that point we lived on the Indian reservation 30 miles away. And with the elbow, he hit me hard in the side of the head. My head bounced off the window. I didn't feel it. I'm absolutely convinced somebody could have shot me and I wouldn't have felt it. I was in a complete state of nervous shock.
Sure.
And I never told anybody. So during that, when I walked in and told the man this, I started telling him my life story, something I'd never done. And I started explaining that all these things happened to me. And he listened really patiently. He was a city worker for the city of Gallup. He was a simple, and I say simple meaning when a complicated guy, but he had a lot of common sense. He was a real nice man. And he fed me twice. I stayed from about 3:30 a.m. till 2 a.m. and told him my entire life story. And he looked at me and he said, "Who have you ever told this to?" And I said, "No one ever. I didn't even know I knew it the way I know it." And he said, "Well, let me tell you something. I'm not the world's most educated guy, but I can tell you this. You can't change any of it, but you can get past it." And all once a light went on. That if I can, I really. So I went back to the hotel I was staying in. I waited, and I kept journals all my life from like 10 years old on. I dozens of them. And I hid them so no one could read it. But at first, dawn, it's 2 hours later in the east than Gallup. I called my dad, which I would never do, and he answers a one ring. And I did something I've never done. Confronted him. I said, "Did you ever feel guilty about what you did to us? Your four kids and your wife, my mom." And in the most sort of ugly, cruel language, he said, "F you, you're a coward, you're a mama's boy, you're a sissy. I never thought you'd be any kind of a man, and you're not. You're nothing. You need revisionist history to make you feel better about your sad, pathetic, wasted life. F you." And he hung up. At that point, I was free of him. And I thought, how have I been held by this man all my life, trying to live up to some kind of weird, warped expectation, trying to satisfy him, when the other half of me wanted to be his exact opposite. But I always wanted to be good in his eyes. And I thought, what have you done to yourself? So I called my mother, which is another thing I rarely did then. Call her almost every single day now. Uh, Very mentally afflicted. She's
Mhm.
94, which is 8 years old with 8 years experience of being really angry and not understanding.
Sure, sure.
But I got a hold of mom. I said, "Mom, do you realize what you did to me in that house? I felt guilty my entire life for not being the man of the house and taking care of you. And I was 10." And she said, "You should feel guilty. You walked away and it's on you. You could have taken care of me. You were my protector and you weren't there for me. You should feel bad. Um, and you're not with me now. You should be living next door to me or in my house and driving a truck like her next husband did." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to be much of a truck driver, and that's no way to really honor you. And there's nothing I could have done to save you." And she said, "Well, that's going to be your story, but my story is you abandoned me." And she hung up. And so I spent I wrote and wrote and wrote.
How
I
old were you when you made these back-to-back phone calls?
52.
Okay.
And why didn't I do this 20 years earlier? Anyway,
No, I'm
but I didn't. And I don't know if I could have. But I
the
said,
parental influence is the strongest influence we'll ever have in our lives.
so I went back to the childhood's a city you can never leave. And I realized that two people, and with throwing a stepmother later, who was the coolest human being I've ever met, she and my dad were a perfect match. And I thought, you've tried to blame yourself for not saving your mom, and you've tried to be man enough for a dad who killed several people and gave it no thought. And you've trapped yourself and you've tortured yourself and you've put yourself in this invisible prison with no walls, but no escape. And this is what you've done to yourself. And I started thinking and thinking, and all at once, uh, things opened up for me. And I was much more open with my friends. Friendships got stronger. Everything got better slowly, but I wasn't ashamed anymore. And so I thought, I've got to write this down, not to keep score, not to make myself look great, because as you know, that book, there's a lot of bad things. Even my publisher, who was was wonderful, Sandra Jonas, said you can leave a couple things out. And I said, well, we can make me Superman or we can tell the truth. But
Hmm.
the reason I'm willing to tell the truth is it's I did the best I could and it wasn't great. But I also want people to know that there are things you can overcome that you believe are impossible to overcome. That's the only reason I wrote it. And I think the reason it's been successful, I didn't do it to make money. I didn't do it to look great. I didn't do it because I felt sorry for myself. I never felt sorry for myself 1 second of any day. I just didn't. My only goal every day of my life was to get through that day. That was
Hmm.
it. Wake
Hmm.
up, get through the next day.
Hmm.
And I did every kind of crazy thing. If you read the book, you'll find out. Uh, but at the end of the day, all I wanted was to say to people, no matter what you think, you can fix it. But there's two things. It'll be extremely hard to fix. It's not like you're just gonna go back and say, well, I did X, now I'll do Y. Did a black thing, I'll do a white thing, or whatever color you want. You're going to have to go back and understand. And what I understood was at age 10 that my spirit got broken. My soul, it just broken and it had never repaired.
In that house, in that moment.
In that moment, that's when it broke. And I never liked myself after that, never loved myself. I never gave myself credit for anything, and I never let anybody in. And I thought, there's some power to this. You read about people who've done incredible things all the time and they write great books and they have done incredible things, right? But this is a different kind of incredible. I would call myself very average, very determined, but very average, persistent. But I kept thinking introspectively, how can I tell this story in a way that people say, hey, I can get through this too? Right? It's not like he's Superman. He's not trying, some people read it and say, well, I wish I was as smart as you. Wish I was as strong as you. Wish I was as pretty as you. Wish I was
Sure.
articulate. But it's not about any of that. It's
Mhm.
just about, I'm going to figure out. And once I figure out that that broke me, and I figured out that the people who broke me still would have me broken and to blame, that the answer was to escape that by rethinking everything I'd been through, giving myself a little bit of credit now and then, but also starting to like myself, starting to love myself, starting to believe in myself. Business wise, I was always able to project what I needed to project,
Right.
right? That wasn't hard for me. I could help you, I could like you, but you'd never like me. And if you and I were like alone talking about ourselves, and I would do everything I could to make it into a joke and either hide or drink too much or do something stupid, something that wouldn't be vulnerable, something that you would know was less than authentic. And I figured that out. And once I figured that out, the book started writing itself.
Wow. So I feel like a lot of it was being able to forgive yourself as well, right? Forgive yourself for the things that you were judging yourself for from a
Exactly.
from a 10-year-old child, right? Which is just absolutely wild to me. You did an amazing job of remaining vulnerable, and there's so much dark, self-deprecating humor. You did a really good job of laying it out without any victimhood whatsoever. And we see throughout the whole story that there's this little boy who is constantly battling to do the right thing in such a distorted environment. How did you maintain that moral compass as a child, given what you were surrounded by?
Wow, you're good. Um, I'll give you just a few examples, Aaron. This is my best way of doing this because I have three siblings. They're all fantastic people who don't really want to be included. That'd be the only area I didn't talk about a bunch, but that's the only part. One day when we were in Gallup, um, and we moved into this horrible duplex, the house before the house that I just described, and it was part of the house was hanging off of a little cliff, and it was all rocks and dirt. Drunks were laying in the front yard. When we drove up to put our stuff, it was a duplex. There were two men urinating on the wall. You had a bail bond, a junkyard, a liquor store open from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., um, and some kind of a check cashing joint. And I just stared at all this. Oh my God. And so I said, Dad, what the hell? Where are we? He said, we're in an idiot's paradise. So the guy that owned the trading post was a nice man. I'd say the rest of the people were just like pimps. I mean, they're just exploiting the hell out of people, right? Um, so one day early on, I was with my brother. We walked down towards the trading post, and I saw an Indian woman dressed in her full regalia, the red velvet and dress, and she had three children, and her husband was standing there, emaciated. He had just taken off his boots and his hat, and he was pawning it to get more liquor. And he was so drunk that I could smell him from the house. And I looked into the woman's eyes and the deep, deep sadness in her eyes. And I started crying really hard. And my brother, who's a great guy, but he's 2 years younger, he said, I understand what you're crying about. I said, look at this. Look what's being done to these people. This guy is hopeless. He'll drink. He'd be naked and still looking for things to sell. He's completely out of it. He's destroyed his marriage, if he ever had one. He's sold all of his crops and things that Nabob's come to town to sell. And they have nothing. They're going to go back to their Hogan with nothing. And I said, this is the saddest thing I've ever seen. And I was always affected by things like that. And it always really upset me. Now, it didn't stop me from acting out. I mean, because I did acted out like a madman. At one point, I say in the book, half of Gallup was looking for me, probably more than half. Cherry bombs, eggs, firecrackers, water balloons. We terrorized that town. We just saw it as I saw everything as funny, right? If it wasn't sad, it was funny, right? The tears of a clown would have. But but I was deeply affected by these things, and I remembered them. And there were many, many other situations where I thought, even as a 10-year-old, okay, so I would read every newspaper cover to cover, and I delivered 5 newspapers a day. Big articles on Navajo alcoholism, right?
Mm.
Every bar's open from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m., and you could get liquor between those 2 hours if you knew to go in the alley. Every article is about we're exploiting the native population. They could sell everything they wanted for pawn and get cheated out of it. And I'm in my own way, I'm laughing. It's society. I'm saying, I'm figuring out something early on about the hypocrisy
Mm.
of mankind.
Hmm.
And Gallup was a perfect incubator for this. On weekends, you get up to 100,000 Navajo people coming through. Reservations the size of Pennsylvania, and Gallup's the only town within 150 miles all four directions. So it's fantastic. People came in with wool, turquoise, jewelry, sheep, and they traded it. They get hard goods and things and go home. But 61 bars, and what they did is fleece these guys every weekend, starting Thursday. And I would run through the bars and forgive me, readers and listeners, with cherry bombs and firecrackers. And I'd say, Kit Carson is coming, and he's bringing the whole cavalry. And I would throw cherry bombs at the tables, and the owners would chase me out, and I'd go from bar to bar to bar, always screaming, Kit Carson's coming, we got to get out of here. And then when I got tired of that, the Navajos, Route 66 crosses Gallup, north-south, and the east-west, I mean, and north-south is the road into the Gallup from the reservation. So the trains come through every 15 minutes, right? So when the trains would leave, you'd have 2 or 3 miles of backup. and people would just rush across. So we'd throw cherry bombs, firecrackers, water balloons, eggs. And I mean, we terrorized the people who came across there. And they were so busy they wouldn't stop. And if they tried, they couldn't. Now, every once in a while, a fast teenager would jump out, chase me, and beat me up. And I'd say, I'll never do it again. And 10 minutes later, we set back up.
Yeah, this was you and Sam, right?
Yeah, we'd
Yeah.
set behind, there was a lumber yard. We'd set up behind some lumber and I'd put the eggs, the water balloons, and the cherry bombs. Mr. Pino sold me my cherry bombs. They got it from Mexican traders who came up and so I had all the explosives in the world. So one of our most famous, and some people are going to think this was really bad, and it was. I probably belong in prison for years from my childhood, but well, that's another issue. Uh, One time we threw a cherry bomb, and there was a lot of these were horse pulled, right? So the horse jumps up, like they're not crazy about cherry bombs. It's not something
Nope.
you should do. And my brother Sam ran and jumped in the wagon and started riding the sheep and started spanking them like they were. And so eventually the wagon snapped up and it pulled off the horse bridle, and all the sheep spilled out onto Route 66. And the people, adults, they're sitting in the back, all tucked in a tight position because the sheep are there and they can't get out and get after us. We shut down the town for about 45 minutes. Oh, we just thought that was great. And we were doing stuff like that every single weekend. And during the week, I would go through the town and do other ridiculous things. And Mr. Pino, whose family still owns Pino's Curios, he loved me. Mr. Pino and I were partners, and he'd say, "Boy, you sure tore up the town last
You
week."
were his greatest entertainment.
Yeah, and he'd say, "Put down some money." So I'd pull out whatever paper money I had, and he'd just give me loads of cherry bombs and firecrackers. I'd take it and we did this for years. And when I would wake up in the morning, my only goal was never to come home till I had to.
Sure, stay out as long as you can. Yeah. We had two ornery boys in our household, so I got quite the chuckle out of you and Sam's shenanigans. As hellion as they were. The stories were great. You did a really good job of describing. I felt like I was completely in the moment. I couldn't help but notice this overarching theme of identity throughout your entire book. The
Yeah,
stuff that we inherit, the stuff that we choose, the stuff that we pretend to be, right? Did you do that intentionally, or did it just kind of come out because that's what it was?
very intentional. So I was in 9 schools by my first 6 years. We never lived anywhere, really. We just moved place to place to place within a 200-mile range. And my father, it's called the pale face lie. And I don't want to be a spoiler alert, Dad lied about a lot of things,
Mm,
right? I discovered a lot of things just because the way I think, and I tricked him into telling me things, but I never knew anything about his background other than he hated his parents.
mm,
So to kind of make a long story short, if you will, Dad told us he was a full-blooded Cherokee,
mm.
and Mom was an Indian too, even though she's translucent colored but she's from Quanah, Texas, and Quanah Parker was from there. So okay, maybe you were one of his kids. She wasn't, of course. But what I determined early, the thing you learn when you're a kid like me is to read faces very,
Mm,
very early.
mhm.
And it's really helped me in lobbying. Sometimes we'll be in meetings, so I'll say, "Hey, that guy's not really help us. So he's not going to help us at all. That meeting's dead." How do you know? I just know.
Just now. Yeah.
But in Dad's case, he had three tells. So the blood vessel between your eyebrows, it would bulge like a garden hose. I mean, it bulged. And his eyes, and it's in the book, bugged out like what I call a Volkswagen Beetle,
Yep.
right? I call it the YB. And he would kind of puff his chest up like, hey, you feel like fighting? You want to come over here and challenge me? And it would get loud. And I always knew he was lying when he would do that. And he would gradually get into it. And it generally involved the Cherokees. And what I determined over a long period of time, and nothing fast, he was, forgive these expressions, these are his, what the Crow family was Dust Bowl, white trash, depression, Okies.
Okay.
When you go to California, they didn't want you either,
Mm-hmm.
right? They were grapes of wrath people. They had absolutely nothing. So my grandfather, bless his heart, went into World War One. First time he ever left. Like he actually lived across the river, born in Texas, but they spent time in Oklahoma. But inside that Dust Bowl area. And he was the seventh of 12 on a farm, which means he got nothing. And so he got drafted into World War One like at 36. He gets over there. He's fighting the Germans and the Slavic people. And he's in the trenches and he gets mustard gassed. And he told my dad and many times that it felt like fire just ripped his lungs inside out, which is what mustard gas does.
Yeah.
And he started coughing and coughing, couldn't stop, and he couldn't see because of the smoke. And there's machine gun bullets going off all over the place. And he eventually, they put him in a hospital. Then they let him out and made him continue to fight. Well, when he got home, his lungs didn't work. They just didn't work. And
Sure.
if you know from the World War One guys, they didn't
A
get
lot
any.
of them.
I
Mhm.
mean, the biggest riots in America were World War One veterans who were angry. So the hospitals didn't know what to do. There were no benefits. He had constant headaches. And I don't know how bad a guy he was before this, but what he became is a world-class bootlegger. And what he would do is he took my poor grandmother, who was dropped off at his house at 14. He's 36 or 7 when he gets home from the war. She's one of 10, has no place to go. She shows up at his house and they apply for a wedding license and they probably hated each other every minute of every day.
Mm.
Dad's the only live birth and they use him from sunup to sundown to pick cotton while Granddad Crow bootlegs. And they would just go from place to place. They had a broken down Chevy truck and a crummy little trailer, and eventually he just busted apart and he couldn't fix the truck. So they started sleeping under bridges, in cars, abandoned chicken coops. And basically, my dad picked enough cotton, my grandmother picked some too, to keep them alive. And he felt like a rented mule. And he was a very bright kid, very sensitive kid, but a very, very angry kid.
Mhm.
And it just got worse and worse and worse. And so my grandfather died uh, 2 hours after picking Johnson grass on the last day of his life in a cotton field. My grandmother married another guy
Mhm.
who I think was a good guy, but Dad thought he was even a worse white trash version of all.
Mm.
And he hated it. And he hated his sons. They weren't educated, they weren't smart in his mind. And he hated everything about that, couldn't stand it. And this was a guy that picked up math and physics and chemistry books and could read them. He said they just explain themselves to you. And
Yeah.
wish I got his intelligence,
Yeah, me too.
but I did not. Listeners, don't expect that from me. But what it did is he became a vicious, vicious psychopath. And before he left high school, um, he didn't go to much school because of cotton picking, but they made him go some. The school counselor took my grandmother aside with dad and said, your son's going to go to prison for a very long time. He picks on people. He beats them to death. He said there's 2 or 3 kids that bumped him by accident, looked at him wrong, said something he didn't like, and he would just get him and beat him and beat him and beat him until he had to be ripped off of him. And he said, there's a parent around here that doesn't hate your son. So when World War II, Dad was the last year that you still went into World War II. Guys born in 27, by and large, were in and out in a year because by the time they got trained and got assigned, you had beat the Japanese surrendered, the Germans
Hmm.
surrendered, and so they came
Do you
home.
mean the last generation for the draft?
He was the last year of that generation.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
And he didn't go to war, but he was on a carrier and they went out and they just brought him right back, right?
Mhm.
But he was in a bar in New Orleans, right? They left him there for like 3 or 4 months and they had GI money. And a guy made him mad in a bar on Bourbon Street. He took him out behind the bar and beat him to his death. No one caught him. And the next day they said one of the sailors has been killed. Does anybody know anything? And no one did. He boxed in Great Lakes Naval Station where they trained him, and he won every match except one. There was an African American gentleman who was a little bit taller, a little bit longer reach, a little bit quicker, and he outpointed Dad. At the end of the fight, Dad said, "I'm going to take you out behind the alley and I'm going to kill you. We're going to have kind of fight that real men have." And the officer who ran it said, "You're going to spend the rest of your training in the hole, eating bread and water, 23 hours a day of dark." This guy didn't do anything wrong. In fact, he beat you fair and square,
Hmm.
and you want to kill him for it. So Dad had something changed him big time. And
Hmm.
he gradually just hated people, hated women because he hated his mom, but he just hated mankind. And as smart as he was, yeah, there's two pieces. Very bright guy, could do things, and a guy that would drop of a hat want to kill you for any reason.
Hmm.
And I think during that time, I talked to him about it twice when he was an adult. One point, he cut me off for like 13 years. But when he got really old, he knew he was going to die soon. He got back in touch with me. Part of the book, the readers, some will love it, some won't. I forgave him and it helped me forgive myself, but I took care of him. My wife and I were his medical and legal guardians, and I talked to him every day, and I would stay up all night in the hospital and go back to work. And we had a lot of conversations at that point. And I told him at one point, "I'm going to write the book. I'm going to track your accomplice's son down. I'm going to do all this." And he said, "You better not." And I said, "Well, count on it." I said, "I've reached a point in life where I understand when I have somebody like you in my life, you're the monster that kills. And here's what you kill. You kill dreams. You kill self-confidence. You kill belief in yourself. You kill everything. You've killed 4 kids and a wife, and you tried to kill a second one, and that's who you are. And I wish you were a different man." And he said, "Well, I just want you to know something. If you were sick, if our positions were reversed, I wouldn't do a thing for you." And I said, "Oh, I understand that because I know who you are. But I'm going to be the son you don't deserve. And I'm going to do things for you that you absolutely should not expect because you are nothing, but I am something. And I still love you." So we
And
went.
you made the commitment to be the exact opposite. That epilogue punched me right in the feels. Talk about a story of complete forgiveness because you had to bring yourself to a place where you were at peace with the things that he had done and the life that was molded around you in order to be able to do that.
Well, you're
It,
very kind.
the whole book was completely gripping, but that epilogue, I was like, I literally don't think I know anybody in my life that would be that would be capable of that. It was
You would. I think what happens, Aaron, is you're unhappy with yourself. I talk about me, and uh, you try to get close to people, and there's some of that, but mostly there's not. And you're very unhappy with yourself. You don't know what to do about it, right? And you're afraid if you tell anybody that they'll want nothing to do with you. And because at that point you see yourself as the story, you're as bad as he is.
I,
And when I was able to separate that, when I went to that house Gallup and had those 2 conversations, and I probably wrote in my notebooks for 5 or 6 hours, probably half the book is from the notebooks on that day. And I thought, wait a minute, this is what people do to themselves. This is why alcoholics marry alcoholics. One of my best childhood girlfriends, so to speak, fourth grade, her dad was a hopeless alcoholic.
Mhm.
Her brother drank herself to death. She was the first kid thrown in the drunk tank in eighth grade. Uh,
Mm.
I got in trouble for throwing cherry bombs. She got in trouble for being drunk. So I connected with her later. She married an alcoholic who beat her.
Sure.
And um, you start realizing that people have very hard times breaking cycles. Well,
Mhm.
my other mantra, other than childhood is a city you can never leave, and when people tell me they've broken through, I always tell them the most powerful thing you can do in your life, the only thing that is total redemption, is break the cycle.
Yeah.
Be the better person, rise above it. It doesn't matter how many times you screw up, because I screwed up a million, 2 million
Mhm.
times. But get through it and understand that it's the next generation and that generation.
Right.
I speak to a lot of orphanages and child care psychiatrists. And one group, I help teach a course, PhD abnormal psych kids. They said, well, we get these kids and tell them, we love you, we can trust you. And I said, you understand that will not work. I said, go get some grass seed, put it on concrete, pour water on it, and watch it grow. It's
Right.
not.
It's not going to work.
They said the most important thing to a really abused, broken kid, the only word is trust, and they don't trust you. And why should they? When adults told me to trust them, they go and tell my dad, and the beatings got far, far worse. Open your mouth and you are dead meat. So no, but it also does is you don't trust yourself. If you don't trust others, you don't trust yourself. So when you run into trustworthy people who are lying and trying to do something, that's how they feel about themselves.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a pretty deep base of self-love and self-respect, you're not able, you can't give anything. I had a ninth grade girl from Houston, and she said, if I can ask you one question, and I knew she had a bad home life, one single thing you could tell me that would change my life, what would it be? And I said, it's very simple. Learn to like yourself, learn to love yourself, and learn to deserve better.
Mhm.
Because a lot of us who don't like ourselves, maybe hate ourselves, we're going to find somebody who agrees, and it's going to end really badly. Because if you don't like yourself, everything you attract is bad. And if you attract somebody way better than you, so to speak, they're not going to hang around for very long.
Right. Or you'll sabotage it.
I mean, the best relationships, whether it's business, friendship, marital, is all about you're a good person, I'm a good person, and I care about you, but it comes from a base of me believing in myself too.
True.
Without it, you've got nothing.
No, absolutely. You're 100% correct. I want to circle back just a little bit. You were talking just a little bit ago about your dad inventing the Cherokee
Yes.
lie
And I didn't.
post prison. I'm dying to know, do you think your mom knew that he was lying, or did she just blindly believe the story that he was telling her? Because they'd
Dad,
had a kid at that point, right? They'd already had one baby and then you.
Dad married two very, very broken people
Okay.
because the only way you could marry him is to be broken.
Like we were talking about. Yeah.
And the reason Dad invented the Cherokee myth, and I learned this from reading a lot of prison memoirs and biographies, and even talking to the warden at San Quentin. So if you go into any maximum security prison, there's a couple things you'll learn. They're all innocent. They
Mm.
did it. Are you kidding?
Yep. Nobody's guilty there.
But the other thing is they'll start in the big yard, they'll start admitting to murders and things they did that they didn't get caught for. So the dichotomy of being a psychopath is not really believing that what you did is wrong and then inventing a way that you didn't do it or that it was
Mm.
deserved. And what Dad did in his broken psychology was create the myth of a Superman. He hated his parents. He hated being an Okie or a Texan. He hated the Dust Bowl, hated the Depression. He hated being beat with a wet rope. He hated picking cotton from dawn till dusk as a kid.
Mm,
And the Cherokees in Oklahoma are proud, but they're a minority. They're picked on. He could identify with
mm,
this brilliant super race that got treated terribly. And it gave him something to believe in that was positive. It gave him a place to go. And I confronted him uh, once before he cut me off for 12 years. I said, did it ever occur to you that your grandfather's name was Meredith Taylor Crow? Did it ever occur to you that his dad was Joshua Jones Crow? Did it ever occur to you that your grandmother is Mildred Augusta Henry Crow? And when you trace them, they come from Northern Ireland, they come from Scotland. Did it ever occur to you? He grabbed me by the throat. I'm at 35, and he said, "You want to go outside?" And and I said, "Dad, you've hit a point that if we go outside and you do what you want, you're the one that's going to wind up in a body bag. You're not fighting me, not fighting you." And he said, "Don't you ever bring this up again. You're a liar, and all you're trying to do is make me look bad. You don't understand what it's like to be a Cherokee. You don't understand what it's like to grow up the way I did. You don't understand anything."
wow.
And he was super angry. And then I got mad at myself, like, why the hell did I do that? Why did I do that? That was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And but through the years, it doesn't make sense, but it does. Because when his chest rose out and as
You
I'm
knew.
I'm somebody, and I'm somebody you have to respect, even though I know you hate me because of my race, you hate me because I'm a minority, but I am a Superman. And that's what he came up with.
Wow. And it sounds like it sounds like to me your dad was so smart that he was able to figure out how to manipulate everyone around him. And we see you throughout your entire memoir. Um, you know that what he's doing is wrong, and you know that what he's asking you to do is wrong, yet you still so long for his approval. I
Yeah,
can imagine that was a lot to unpack while you were writing this. What was that like?
there's a ton to unpack, and you've hit on probably the most difficult thing in my life because, and sometimes I get really criticized. I get notes, you're a scumbag, you deserve to be in prison, you're a horrible guy. And I'm like, okay, fine. I mean, I'm not going to argue that. Um, when dad would go, we would drive along. And when we were stealing tools and avoiding his accomplice, he always thought his accomplice was after. Um, he would say, okay, there's three guys that have been walking in the last half hour. If we killed them, where would we put them? Tell me the last three cars that came by passing us either direction, give me their license tags, and how far are we from the police station? We would play these games. And I would say you'd put them under the culvert. The last three guys were Navajo families coming in, and they didn't even look at you. We haven't seen a policeman all day. The police station's like 12 miles away, and the odds are we could get away with it. But you had to play these games with him just to keep him from beating on you. I think the one episode, and I don't get asked about this a lot, but Dad and I have spent all day stealing tools, probably 13 at this point. And so he's the safety officer and in charge of all the tools. And they were expensive tools. They're electric tools back when people didn't have them.
Mhm.
And he would steal them, but no one kept good inventory on the reservation. They have these big Quonset huts of tools. So he would steal just enough and get away with it. And we'd go to Gallup and we would fence them to these guys who would sell them to construction people. So one day we stole all kinds of stuff. We had a code. I was the watch out. And if a truck came up and he was inside stealing, and I didn't know what the truck was, could be friend, foe, could be going by, could be stopping, I'd throw one rock at the Quonset hut. That meant be alert.
Yeah.
If I threw a second rock, that meant you better get to the front because we may face real trouble. If I threw three, it's sprint hard and get the hell out of here. So we had this code, we had this whole system, and I knew how he thought. I knew what he would say before he said it. I knew what he was going to do. It was amazing. I got into his head, but then I didn't want to be in his head. But your question is, how did I unpack this? And the answer was very, very slowly and very difficult. And I still wake up in the middle of the night, not more than I like to admit, remembering something horrible and screaming, "Oh my God." No, so what the hell was that? I said, just one of those things I can't get out of my head. Um, but on this one day, it was in August, and it was 100 degrees, and you're in the desert, and we're driving along, and we're very close to the reservation. We're about 4 or 5 miles from the reservation, and we come around a corner, and so this is something a listener is going to this is fascinating. So Navajos, and I think most of them cannot drink on a reservation, even today. And up until 1952, Indians were not allowed to drink off a reservation. It was the World War II guys that came home and appealed, and Eisenhower actually did. So these brilliant guys put the Navajo in about a half mile from the reservation border. And this thing was really like a long warehouse, sold more liquor than any
Gold
out
mine.
in the whole state of Arizona, including Phoenix and Tucson. But what they would do is they would come off the reservation and buy, and no one checked their ID, no one cared, right?
Sure.
And in Gallup, they would drink their brains out and drive into the reservation and kill anybody that moved. The highest death rates in the country were Navajos driving back to the reservation
Drunk
point.
driving.
Oh God, yes. And when they died in the winter and fell down, we called them popsicles. The police did. They're frozen and their lips were blue. And so you'd hear in the police dispatch, two popsicles. And during the winter, Dad and driving back and forth, God, we'd run over to a handful every year.
Wow.
But we pulled up to the Navajo Inn and we go just past it. Okay, we're at the Arizona New Mexico line. At this point, it's illegal to sell to Indians because when you cross the line, that's a reservation in Arizona. So there's these beautiful set of rocks in next to Wind Rock called the Haystacks. And they're beautiful, round, red rock, and gorgeous. And Dad sees a truck and it looks like an accordion, right? And I look out and you've got waves of heat. And I realize there's no windshield. And I see a shirt hanging over the steering wheel. And I'm thinking that's an optical illusion. And Dad, who was the safety officer, he had to investigate all accidents with government vehicles. This guy had a government vehicle, had a GS on it. He said, "Oh, God damn it, I've got to investigate this. I'm going to have to write it up." And he said, "Stay in the car." Well, being me, I didn't stay in the car, right? So I come racing out of the car, and the guy's been decapitated. Dad picked up his head by the Indian braid, looks at his eyes, yeah, upside down, and walks over and drops it in the front seat of the truck. Well, I start puking.
I
And,
bet. Yeah.
and he smacks me. He said, "I knew you little sissy. I knew you'd start blowing up. You're just a coward. You can't handle anything." I'm like, so he writes up the accident, puts the head back in. The body was already there. And I'm just, you get drunken people all over the parking lot. This guy probably had done this the night before, was still just sitting there, right? So Dad writes it all up. He's got these forms in his car that he always carries. And we're driving along a few more miles, and I'm not saying anything, right? My stomach's just like, and he stops. And we're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. We're between Fort Defiance and Window Rock, and it's just a long road. And I look around and I said, "Is something wrong? Is the car wrong?" And he said, "No." He said, "Something else." So he gets in the back of the trunk. He pulls out some beef jerky and he had these. We used to carry these water things in canvas bags, and you'd see them in the old ones. They put them on the front of the car, keep them cool, and he had a little bowl. So we walk about a quarter of a mile into the desert, and there's a coyote trapped in. I mean, these were huge traps, right? Navajos hate coyotes. One, they eat their sheep, and two, it's part of the devil in their creation story.
Yeah.
The coyotes are not good. So he gets to this coyote and he's explaining to me the whole time, this isn't the coyote's fault. Coyotes kill sheep. That's what they do. It's not right to trap them. It's not right to kill them. They're just doing what they do, right? I'm listening. So he gets to this trap and oh God, was he strong. So he gets a towel and he wraps it around the coyote's chin, holds him up in the air, and with one hand he pulls the trap off. And I'm watching blood vessels and muscle just bulge.
Like a clamp trap, like a bear trap?
Well, I'm not sure. It was big.
Wow.
And I mean, you talk about a strong guy. He was so
Uh,
strong. So he does it. And he said, well, this guy's going to live. He said his paw is hurt, but he hadn't been here very long, but he's going to be very angry. So I
mhm.
want you to back up. So we put water and beef jerky, and that gradually undoes the towel. And we start walking backwards. So he growls at us and, makes noise, but he doesn't chase us. And he eats the jerky, drinks the water, and limps off. So that says, stop. What do you see around you? I said, well, other than the coyote and the trap, a hell of a lot of rocks, a lot of sand, some cactus. He said, no, 5 million years ago, we're at the bottom of the ocean. And he gives me the most incredible geology lesson ever and walks me through the last 75 million years. And he looks at me and he said, you need to know this. You need to read all of the English literature greats. You need to read The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. You need to read Chaucer. You need to read Longfellow. Because you see, if you're not smart about the whole world, you're no better than that coyote. He said, now let me explain something else to you, boy. He said, you think stealing's wrong. Let me explain the second part. We're on an Indian reservation. It is a zoo. They are owned by white people. White people tell them how much they can make, how many sheep they can have, how much they can spend on food, where they can go, where they can't go, where they can live. And you think it's wrong that we're stealing from the people who had all their land stolen. He said the
Mm,
whole thing is nothing but a scam. And
mm.
the only thing a man should do is live by the code. And the code is if you cross me, I'll kill you. He said everything is hypocrisy. Generals kill more people than thugs. Presidents kill more people than all the generals in the world. All the wars were started by people who were heads of something. He said everything in the world that you see is a complete hypocrisy. There is no love. There is no truth. There is no justice. There's get what you can get. And that's it.
Wow, listening to you talk about him, I mean, first of all, we talked about this before, and you mentioned it several times in your book. He's incredibly brilliant, which is so respectable, right? And then he released the coyote, and there's also another story about a bear who is being held in the worst captivity, and I don't want you to tell it because I genuinely want readers to read it. It was unbelievable, and I found myself rooting for your dad in that moment. So that's commendable. How confusing for you as a child to see this person who you see as just violent and angry and mean and makes horrible decisions, but at the same time he counterbalances it with all of this intelligence and some
Yeah,
compassion. But I'd be interested to know, did he ever release like a deer or a bunny? Did he show the same compassion for the
he
weaker
did.
animals that he showed for the predatory animals?
No, you've hit on something no one else has hit on. So he felt sorry for animals because they had no choice.
Yeah.
But humans always let him down. I mean, the thing about dad, and there are 100 of those stories in the book, as we know. So tell the listeners and readers, you'll find all kinds of crazy stuff. But people always let dad down. So dad's big thing.
Mm,
He used me as an accomplice. He tricked his best friend into participating in what would have been a murder. He tried to co-opt my sister to help murder my stepmother. He always did things by using other people to help him do his dirty deeds. Very manipulative, very charismatic, um, and people let him down. What he basically wanted, if he met you, like, well, if we kill people, you're going to bear the body and say that we weren't there. If we get caught, it's your fault, right? I mean, that's
mhm,
just who he was. So people let him down all the time. He would love them and then he would discard them because they didn't do what he said they would do. But not animals. Poor animals were like a young dad, not their fault, completely innocent, uh, completely devoid of vice or angst. They were just out there doing what nature taught them to do. He could relate to
mhm,
them. He
mhm,
was very kind to them.
mhm.
Uh, but it never extended to his family and it never extended um, to anybody close to him. He turned on all of us at various times. And even when he came back to me, um, when he invited me, I got invited to something my older sister did. And he walked up to me and he said, "Can you ever forgive me?" And I said, "I've already done that." Well, here's the thing, and I'll tell only one other story about him. Um, on his what he thought was his deathbed, he had two strokes, and during one of the strokes, he was in the Navy hospital. My stepmother was a naval officer, so he had free medical care at Navy hospital. And so one night, my brother and I are there, and he thinks he's going to die, right? He's hooked up to everything. And I saw for the first time in my life real fear in his face. Only time I ever saw him afraid. And he said, and he motioned for me to give him a piece of paper and a pencil. And, "Can you ever forgive me?" I said, "Dad, I already forgave you, love you. I'm going to be here for you." As soon as he got better, he was mean instantly. And I said, "You know, Dad, what's great about you, you're forgiving right up till the moment you need something and it's all gone. You're the most transactional human being in the world. And you're very used to people doing what you want them to do." And I said, "But I get it and I don't care. And I'm here because I'm the person, again, I'm the son you don't deserve, doing things for you that you have no right to expect." And he said, and he turned to me and he said, he was crying actually just a little bit. He said, "I don't understand why you're here." And I said, "You don't understand anything about real life and real human nature and love. You don't get it. And I can't help you with that. You're 85 years old and obviously you're not in a good place, but I'm explaining to you something that you can understand on paper. If some English great had written this as a novel, you would get it,
Mm.
but you don't understand it as a human. You don't get it. You just don't understand at all." And on his deathbed, which happened less than 6 months later, and I had to go in and really make peace at the end. And every child's going to have to do that with every parent. Maybe you have, and I hope you haven't, but
No, I'm blessed.
and I hope you never do. I mean, I hope it's just fall asleep and but he called me in and he reached out and grabbed my hand and he could have broken my finger. I mean, he was not going to live more than a few hours. He still had incredible strength in his arm. And he said, "Come down here, kiss me." I'm like, what the hell are you talking? I kissed him on both cheeks, which, he'd never, he said, "You're the only one of the four I loved." And I said, "That's not fair. That's not right. My older sister, my younger sister, they're great people. My younger brother, he's a great guy. Maybe they didn't live up to your code, but they lived up to be really good people. And then buy into any of this code stuff. They're good people." So you're the only one that understood me. And I said, "That's more of a curse than a blessing, but you're right. I did understand you. I do understand you." I said, "Do you have any regrets? Something you want to talk about?" He said, "Before we get to that, you're going to do a eulogy for me, and it's going to be the greatest eulogy in the world." I want you to do it, and I want you to bring people to tears. And I said, Dad, I could easily do that without any of the lives. You grew up with a dad who couldn't read or write. You read to him when you're like 4 years old. You rose all the way up to working for a United States senator
Yeah.
on the Environment and Public Works Committee and helped write the Clean Water Act. You overcame things that are impossible over and over. And I said, if anything, I'm standing on your shoulders and not even doing a good job of it. Uh, you're the smartest guy I've ever met, and you're a guy that basically just walked through life with nothing but the shirt on his back. Yeah, I can tell that story, and I will tell that story. And I said, you don't have to worry about it. It'll be a great eulogy, it'll be an amazing eulogy. It'll be accurate, it'll be truthful. And he said, you could spend anything, just do the right thing. I said, I will do the right thing. There won't be much spent. And he said, well, you probably lie. These are two conversations I'm combining. He said, it's a lot if you probably lie all the time. And I said, you know what's funny about that? Let's say you go to a senator, congressman, and you tell your story, and it's a complete lie, right? But it's completely favorable to you.
Mhm.
You could get away with it that one time, but they're going to find out you lied, and they'll never trust you again. And I said, what I do with people when I'm on the Capitol Hill, if there's something bad about me, I'll say, look, this is not a perfect deal, and we're here, you're here. I don't know what you're going to do, but this is who we are.
Mm.
So even if they think you're wrong on everything, you can always, their door's always open to you,
Right.
always open.
Yeah.
And
You still have integrity.
I said, what I had to unlearn from you and learn on my own was that if you're straight with people, they're on your side. And
Hmm.
you won't win every time, but you'll lose every time you lie.
It's true.
And you should. And he said, I just don't get it. And I said, well, but I said, the thing about it is you had the brain power to do anything you wanted to do. Anything you wanted to do. You could have been a doctor, you could have been a surgeon, you could have been anything.
Mm.
And I said, but you kept getting in your own way. And you couldn't get out of your own way.
Mhm.
And you told he basically in San Quentin was so smart. They had an abacus where they tested prisoners, right? And these are not geniuses. Most of these people are really not smart people, right? And they do really stupid things. On one of the tests, he hit 100 and they redid it. So it came out like a 180. And so the psychiatrist said, why did you fake your test to an 80? So I didn't fake anything. And they went back and looked at the test. So no one's ever scored like this. No one's ever hit 100 and come all the way back. You're like, your IQ's almost twice what most of these guys in here are. And then dad started BSing him about, I really the guy was a convict and he attacked me first. He just spun this whole thing out. But the psychiatrist was so impressed that he'd met a smart guy. He gave him a job inside the warden's office, doing autopsies, doing prisoner exchanges, handling the diet. He had it made. He said that the years in San Quentin after the first few months, the easiest thing he ever did in his life. And he used to joke with me. He said, you're more clever than I am. You could talk your way out of San Quentin before God got the news. I'm like, oh God, no. But the dichotomy is extraordinary, but he always set himself back again and again and again.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it sounds like he used that enormous brain power for something manipulative rather than something productive. David, I listened to your story on Audible and it was very good. Your narrator was fantastic, but it wasn't you. Did you by chance pick a piece of your story to read to us today?
I would love to do that, Erin.
I would love to hear it.
And I want to thank you for letting me do this. So I thought a lot about what you said. Where do you start? And I picked chapter 21. And the reason I did is it's a pivotal moment in my life that I still remember. So let me read this. At the end of our first week in school, I walked into the house feeling relieved I didn't have to face the bullies or dogs again until Monday. Dad stood inside the door, home early from work. Get in the car, he said to me. You and I are leaving for Gallup. The urgency in his voice made my stomach churn. He had promised us we'd all go with him to Gallup the next day when he shopped for groceries. So what was this about? He was agitated and angry, pushing me outside. After telling Lonnie, Sam, and Sally we would be gone for a few hours, he and I got into the Rambler and took off in silence, his eyes bugged out and the Y vein pulsing on his forehead. As his chest puffed, he began twitching and arguing with himself. I asked repeatedly why just the two of us were headed to Gallup, but he didn't answer. He acted like I wasn't in the car. The sun hung low in the sky when we parked on South Cliff Drive across from our old house. Where was Mom now? Surely she would have left after coming back to the empty house. Dad pulled out a pair of binoculars and slowly scanned from one corner of our old living room window to the other. He continuously adjusted the knob, studying the house for what seemed like an hour, though it couldn't have been for more than 10 minutes. Sneak in and see if your mother is there, he said. I need to know, and don't get caught. Dad obviously thought she was inside, but how? Did he think she was dead? I didn't want to find out. Get moving. He shoved me against the passenger door. Scurrying across the street, I hoped no one would see me. My friend Billy lived next door, but I never wanted to see him or his family again. Through a side window, his mother watched us slink away like burglars in the night. I'll never forget her angry eyes. She hated Dad, and I didn't blame her. I hated him too. The heavy wooden garage door was ajar, and I pulled it open. My heart sank at the sight of Mom's broken down brown Ford station wagon inside. She had to be there. And if she was alive, she'd be in terrible shape, trying to make do in the cold, empty house. What would I say if she saw me? Sorry for ditching you? If I found her dead, I'd know I'd killed her by breaking her heart. I wanted to run at full speed through the streets of Gallup, away from all of it. Maybe Mr. Pino would let me live in his storage room. I opened the basement door and waited for my eyes to adjust to the dark. When I could see the familiar green and black checkerboard tiles on the floor, I slowly tiptoed up the stairs, trying not to make the steps creak. As I crept softly into the living room, I prayed it was empty, but I knew better. That late afternoon light came through the window, gave me a clear view of Mom slumped in the corner, her clothes piled where Dad had left them on the dirty mattress. Her face was contorted in pain. She raised her head but didn't seem to see me. Her vacant eyes showed no emotion. Until that moment, I had not known the look of complete hopelessness. My arms and legs felt too heavy to move. I fell on my knees crying. Her eyes came alive when she realized I was there, and she struggled to her feet. I forced myself to stand and walk towards her, stepping around the mattress and pile of clothes. She put her arms around me. Don't leave me this way, she said, holding my shirt and neck tight. You're my oldest boy. Protect me. I need you. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Mom, I blubbered into her shoulder. Mom's tears shook my shirt as we stood holding each other. Suddenly, the hair on the back of my neck, the same way it had in Albuquerque when Dad found Mom with his hidden mail. I turned to him standing inches behind me, his face swollen with fury. For once, I didn't care. Nothing he could do to me was worth from what I just experienced. You couldn't even do one simple thing I asked, he said, yanking me from my mom's arms. He shoved her aside, but she didn't fall. She grabbed my shirt to pull me from him, but he jerked me away harder, tearing my shirt. Thurston, let me at least have David, please. Thelma Lou, get out of this house. Go to the nut house or your whore mother, but get the hell out of here. We don't want you. Dad dragged me to the front door. Mom tumbled to the floor, crying and shaking. Her arms and legs sprawled. If grief could have killed her, she'd been dead. I wondered if she might be better off dead and hated myself for the thought. Still gripping my arm, Dad marched across the street and shoved me into the Rambler. He went around to the driver's side, started the engine, and whacked the side of my head with his fist. A ringing jolt rattled my ears as my head bounced off the passenger window. I was too numb to feel it. You'll never be much of a man, David. I should leave you with her. You're a goddamn coward. Dad had that right. I was a coward. What else would you call a son who wouldn't protect his completely helpless mother? I lacked the moral fiber to stand up to him and to help her. A better son would have stayed. When he got home, my siblings didn't ask where we'd been, and I didn't tell them. something broke inside me that day.
Mm. Oh, I'm covered in goosies. David, what did you learn about yourself by writing your memoir?
You know, I learned that I was a better person than I think I am. um, I learned that part of my drive was to be one. I realized I never would escape my childhood, but that I could turn it into something positive. We've had in my little firm great partners, well over 200 kids we've mentored and gotten into jobs that we've trained. I've been active in Big Brothers Big Sisters. My charity is a homeless shelter in Albuquerque called the Barrett House, which is a place I wish my mom could have gone. She was homeless for a good period. And it's just made me completely focus on you can do better things than you think. They don't have to be heroic. You don't have to be Bill Gates, but there's a way to be a better man. And that every day of my life, I try to think, I hope I can be better than I was yesterday. And deeply flawed, right? I mean, you read the book, there's just so many flaws, and I still have things I have to work through. But the goal is just always to do better. And when I wrote the book, I realized you've been trying to do better for a very long time. You deserve to be more gentle with yourself, to have liked yourself a long time ago. And what's really interesting is all my college buddies and all my clients, they all read it and they gave me, I got like unbelievable number of five-star reviews, and they all said the same thing. We always knew something was really wrong, and now we know. Why didn't you tell me? And I told all of them, if you grew up like I did, you can't tell. There's nothing to tell. You have to come to peace with yourself before you can tell a story like that. And you have no idea what it takes to come to peace with yourself when you have a broken life. And I'm, people have gone through worse all the time, but what I went through was enough to completely break me. And if I have any accomplishment, it's that I was able to undo that.
Yeah, man, I think it's so powerful. You know, we are all a product of our childhood, like you said. It's the city that you never get to leave, right? So we some of us have good circumstances, some of us have not so good circumstances, but even the worst of circumstances, it always boils down to it's and I certainly am not trying to diminish it, but a choice to either allow it to propel you to be something better
Yeah.
or to allow it to hold you back so that you wallow around in it. And you chose to allow it to propel you, and you made damn sure that it did that. So, bravo to you for that.
Thank
Bravo.
you. Thank you.
How about if we move on to a little bit of a lighter note? Can we talk about your writing process? What were some of the challenges you faced while you were putting the pen to paper?
Well, I am very dyslexic, right? And um, I'm a much better storyteller than I am writer. So I struggled with this. I had a great editor, publisher, and she pulled out the story. She pulled it out of me. And what I learned is one, a lot of people are afraid to write because they think, this is garbage. I'm no good. As you do in some of your podcasts, imposter syndrome. Who the hell am I? I'm nobody. And this isn't going to work. And I did draft after draft after draft. And I sent some of them off, and people like, yeah, there might be a good story in here, but you sure as hell haven't told it. And so I went to a writer's conference, yeah, in Southern California. And one night there was a published author, and we're all aspiring writers, at least we think we were. And you could read one or two chapters from your book, and every person in the circle, there about eight, could make a comment. And the comment had to be constructive, right? Not like you're fat and you're stupid and boy, that was awful. It had to be, I didn't understand this, or what about this? So I read the chapter before the one I read to you. I woke up one morning and I did all my usual crazy stuff. The girl I liked, Violet, I kicked the kickball at her head and she stuck her tongue out. And then we got to the cafeteria and had milk, and I stomped the triangular cartons and made sure it went up the legs of the cafeteria workers, which made them furious. And I did all of my usual stupid stuff. And I got to end of class, and the day goes on, and finally my teacher says, David Crow, the principal wants to see you. So 30 sets of eyes are like, you're dead. So Violet turned to me and said, you're going to prison forever. You'll never see me again. So I get to the principal's office and he says, David, do you know why you're here? And I start in. I didn't do it. My brother did it. Somebody else did it. I'm sorry. Don't tell dad. And he says, no, your mother called. And she said you love baseball more than life. You're going to watch the last 3 or 4 innings of the World Series. Now, how I started that chapter was the principal called me in and I got to watch the last 4 innings of the World Series. Mom had made the call and he actually did it. So when I started with that paragraph, every hand went up. I'm looking around like, oh boy, everybody's having a comment, and probably not positive because it's an instant. And I get around, and by the time that hour was over, they said, tell your story, throw out the details, get the reader involved, and let us feel what you feel. When you woke up that day, this isn't long after Elephant Hill, after I totaled 2 cars with a tire, whole nother story. And I was a nervous wreck because Dad had said one final time, we're going to get rid of your mom now, and you have to go along. And I expected something bad soon. So I go through that day, and by the time I hear the principal call, I mean, I'm wetting my pants, right? Because there's 500 reasons and none of them good. And they said, you've taken all of this out, the suspense away from the reader. Why am I going to read the rest of your chapter? And he said, I'm so used to being a lobbyist. Like, what happened today? HR 1637 passed 33.
Right. Just the facts, Jack.
And you know this because I can tell the way you've done this interview that you have to tell a story and you have to explore the story and you have to feel you have to feel it, see it, touch it, taste it. And that's what I had to learn. And that was the hardest thing to learn.
That's a lot.
It's
That's a
a
lot. You did one of the biggest challenges for memoirists is being true to their memory, right? Because that's what it's all about. Um, but still while protecting the people in their life and their family, especially when the stories that you're telling are shedding them in a darker light. You did that really well. How did you navigate it? Like how?
hard. My siblings didn't want me to do it. My wife didn't want me to do it. My kids said, make sure that we cannot be connected to you, period. So I told my siblings, um, I honor you, I respect you. I couldn't have got here without you. This isn't about you. It's about you, but it isn't about anything you did wrong. And my younger brother got really angry, you know. So I sent him the book and I said, what do you think? He said that every single thing in here is a lie. And I said, okay, let's go through it. Anything that you think's factually in error, I'll toss it out. So I said, you were born, September 23rd, 1954 in Gallup, and your middle name is Eddie. And do you know why? He said, no. I said, did it ever occur to you it's not Edward, it's not Edgar, it's not Edwin? He said, so what? I said, you're named after the prison guard that handed Dad the telegram on his 21st birthday telling him he had a baby daughter. The only man nice to him in the prison, in the guards. And you don't know that, and I do. I said, that's fine. But at least you know. Younger sister, I sent it to her, said, do whatever you want. But my niece, who works with me, I sent it to her, and I said, I want you to read this to my older sister, dear mother, chapter by chapter. And if she says no, it's no. She's going to be the judge of the four. And when we got to the end, my sister was crying, and she looked at my niece and said, thumbs up, tell David he can write. And that was it.
Oh, so that gave you the permission. Good.
Well, she tried to commit suicide and would have died if she hadn't had her stomach pumped.
Yeah.
In some respects, every one of the four of us went through worse than I did. I mean, the girls were touched in ways that you should not. Let me just say it that way. My younger brother was beaten harder than me because he wasn't as good at lying and getting out of stuff, and he didn't really try. Everybody suffered tremendously. It's not like three kids had a perfect life and poor David. It wasn't that at all.
Right. It's
And
your memoir. It's your memoir.
right, but I, but
They
I,
choose to write one, they can do that too, right?
and I think I was pretty accurate with what they went through. I just didn't
Yeah.
spend tons of time focusing.
And you didn't give a lot of details. You alluded to a couple of things, but you didn't give a lot of details. I thought you were very respectful.
I was in a bookstore in Phoenix 4 or 5 years ago. I did a book tour, and a woman, very attractive young lady, probably early 30s, walked up to me and started crying, put her arms around me. And thinking, okay. And her significant other was there. I called him over. So you come over and stand next to us. And I said, what chapter in my book upset you? I need to know. And she said, chapter 12. And I said, who molested you? And how long did it last? And
Mm.
she burst into tears. I never told anybody I was molested. I said, clear as
Abs-
clear. It's completely clear what happened because it's completely clear why you cried when you saw it. I said, I don't know either one of you, and I have zero psychiatric training except that I kind of understand it, but I don't. I my wish for you. I think your significant other really loves you, and here you are. You need to go talk to a therapist about this, and you need to tell everything that happened. And who were they that did this?
mm,
She cried some more, and she said it was my two uncles. And I said, you have a big opportunity right now. You've hid this all your life. For some reason, you came to my book event and you came to me and you're tearful. And I'm glad you did because you see the impact of your words and they can help, not hurt. But the only way out of this for you and the only way to make your relationship stronger because you don't like yourself, you clearly don't love yourself, and you clearly are dealing with this. And who wouldn't? But you have a great opportunity now to go. And I don't care what this does to your uncle or your family or anything. And I don't know if you should tell them I know what you do, but you need to get this out.
Yeah.
And I've had that kind of thing happen to me.
Yeah.
Uh, I was at another bookstore and one of the Indian kids shut up and said, are you the David Crow I grew up with on the Indian Rose? I said, yeah. He said, I'm coming just to see if you're still alive. He said, you fought every Navajo kid. It didn't matter how big, how strong. He said, you were unbelievable. And I said, well, the worst meeting would have been at home. Dad would have beat me far worse than any kid. You haven't, the war started inside the house and Navajo kids didn't like me and I understood it, right? If you've been through what they've been through and you had to prove yourself and it took 2 or 3 years to do it. And I love them now and they love me and everything's great. But um, I said, I understood there was no way out. And I would come home just beaten senseless. And my first angel, Evelyn, who's across the street, my 80-year-old Navajo, loved her to death. Still think of her all the time. She used to say, I'm going to walk to school with you and beat up the bullies. And I said, Evelyn, I know you would. She said, why do you fight them? Why don't you run? And it's because there's no place to hide. There's no
Mm,
place to go. Dad would say, you live here, fight back, be a man, and stand up for yourself.
mm.
And I did, I didn't love it. And I got the crap beat out of me many, many times. But
You were surviving. You were surviving. That
I
was
told people I would have looked like Brad Pitt and been a movie star, except for all the times my face got beat in.
What was the biggest surprise about sharing your story with the world?
How much they were sympathetic with me, how many friends I made. I made friends with four David Crows. I have thousands
Ow.
and thousands of people who said, if you ever come through my town, you have to come over and have dinner. I've had about 100 book club Zooms, a lot of true crime podcasts, which are interesting. But how much goodwill it has generated, and even helped me in my career and life. And people all the time will just walk up to me, say, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. You wrote this." And I was at any kind of an event, at least one person will walk up and say, "I absolutely loved your book."
Mhm.
And I admired you. And I said, "Well, I'm glad you love the book. There's not a lot to admire about me. I didn't do it all right." And they'd say, "Well, you did a lot more right than you think." And that part, one of my toughest clients, he called me and he said, "We're going to buy 100 books and you're going to give a talk in our annual meeting." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, really." And I'm buying them and I'm handing them out as gifts.
For a corporation, a company, I
Uh,
presume.
my Illinois corn growers, I
Okay.
represent.
Okay.
And but several company clients have done it, um, and many of the book club Zooms have bought my books before it. And something happened that I think is incredible. A couple months ago, an entire child psychiatry practice hired me to do a 2-hour book Zoom and paid me an honorarium. And they asked me questions, and most of them are MDs and PhDs, right? They're both. And one guy was really interesting. He said, "I read your book, and there's something I need to know." He said, "I'm white, and I married an African American woman, and my kids get bullied." And I said, "Let me explain something. There's two kinds of bullying in life. If you're inside a house where you don't love yourself and you don't believe in yourself, and the people that raised you don't believe in them, you're bullied there, and you go out and you get bullied, you believe you deserve it." But what your boys have learned is you're proud of your wife, you love your wife, she's your equal, you feel equal. Your heritage is something that you built because you're proud of it. And you can't make the world be kinder, but you can sure as heck teach these young men to be proud of themselves and fight back, and by being honorable men and by standing up for themselves. And I'm going to make you a promise: over the course of their life, that's the very most important thing you can do, is show them the honor and dignity inside your house. If you have that, you have nothing. If without that, you have nothing. But if you have
Mhm.
that, you have everything, and they're going to be just fine.
So true. So true.
So
David, I think you've already really clarified this, but I just want to like highlight it and underline it because I think it's so important. What do you want readers to take away from your book?
what do I want people to get from this book? That you can be in a position that you think is hopeless and hopeless. That you can think poorly of yourself. How many letters do I get? I'm fat, I'm stupid, I'm ugly. Well, so you're none of those things, but you were told that.
Mhm.
The best city you can ever leave. What I want to leave every reader is you can rise above any way you were raised, but you have to go back and dig through why you feel bad about yourself, why you don't love yourself, and why you think you deserve bad things. As one woman said, I've dated 4 or 5 guys and they all just sleep with me and leave me. And I said, and 100 guys will do that until you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, you're going to meet the guy and that's all he wants. You're going to say, "I'm sorry, bye." I said, even beautiful people, smart people, they get treated bad. It's not like you get treated bad because you think you're bad. But smart people, good people say, that won't work for me. I'm not putting up with that. And have a good life. And they don't stop until they find people that believe in them too. And that's the most important thing you can possibly have. And it may be the hardest thing that you ever achieve. But when you do, by all means, break the cycle, pass it on.
You got to do the work, though. You're absolutely right. What a beautiful
Thank you.
message. So, where can people find you and where can I had to use my backup camera today, so I want to
So
get a little.
You can get it from Amazon. Thank you, Aaron.
I love the cover. I love the art. Beautiful.
And I'm going to come through Nashville and take you to lunch.
Yes, please do. I would love that.
Yeah, I would love that too.
Let's do it.
Uh, you can get it through Amazon and my publisher, SandraJonasPublishers.com.
Okay, I'll put all that stuff in the link below. What's next for you?
I'm working on a memoir that's taken me 5.5, almost 6 years to
I thought I heard a little something about that.
yeah.
What can you tell me?
I can't tell you much other than it begins with what went so terribly wrong in my dad's life that made him who he was. I get a lot of that. Why would a guy that smart and all that turn out the way he did? But there's a metaphor there. That he got broken in a way that either was worse for him or he didn't have the psyche to overcome it, right? Because I talk to a lot of people who will say, I get what you're saying. I can't do what you're telling me to do. I'm still fat, stupid, ugly. I said, you have to do something different. Or you
Hmm.
just sit at a bar and drink yourself to death and be alone. And how many letters do I get? I'm alone at Easter, Thanksgiving, all this. No one wants me. I said, no, you don't want yourself. If you want yourself, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and there's nothing sexier, more attractive than a self-confident person. Nothing.
So true.
And you have so much to give, but first you have to believe you can give it, and that's your work.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing more about this new memoir.
Well, we will be in touch, Aaron.
Absolutely. I have so much respect for you. I honestly do. And I don't, just for the record, think you give yourself enough grace. I so appreciate you sharing your story with the world. And thank you so much for reading your piece.
Thank you. Well, you've made a friend for life, and if you want to know what makes this book worthwhile, it's conversations like we just had.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy to hear that. That's my goal to help people share their story because we need more of that. We need
Well,
more of that.
you're incredible. I wish we talked about you, but I realized this hour was about me.
It was absolutely about you. Yes, sir. But
But
let's do lunch. I'll tell you all about myself.
next conversation, I want you to tell me all about you.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to For Love of Memoir. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, follow, and share the show. It really helps us reach more memoir lovers like you. You can find links to today's guest, their work, and anything we mentioned in the episode right in the show notes. Until next time, keep writing your story.